Welcome back to Queers of Free Action. I'm Tara, and this is a supplemental episode. If you're already familiar with the basics of D&D, you can fully skip this one, and there will be a new episode in your feed next week. However, if you've never played D&D before at all, if you're not familiar with the concept of a tabletop role-playing game, you should stick around. This one's for you. So, what are we doing here? Essentially, we're telling a collaborative story. Georgiana, Gray, Bates, and CJ are all players. That means they each have one character that they play, and those characters are the protagonists of our story. I, as the game master, am responsible for everything else. The setting, the villains, the old lady down the street who makes muffins for the players. I make up a world and introduce a conflict, and the players decide how they want to interact with the world and deal with that conflict. Now, we could just sit around all day and do that without any rules or anything, but what happens when we reach a point of high stakes, or split-second decisions? What happens when the party, that is, the group of player characters, wants to attempt something difficult? In D&D, we use a neutral arbiter to decide the outcome of things like that, and to guide us in our storytelling. That's the role of the dice. The golden rule of D&D is that when you want to attempt something difficult, you will roll a 20-sided die, which we call a d20, and then you'll look on your character sheet to determine what bonuses to add to it. If your character is good at the thing they're trying to do, you'll have a larger bonus. If the end result of the die roll, plus your character's bonus, meets or beats the difficulty number, which is usually set by the game master, you succeed. If not, you fail. So let's talk about the character sheet for a moment. There are all kinds of bonuses and features and abilities that you can have. For example, a paladin can heal their allies, cast spells like protection from evil and good, and smite their foes by dealing bonus radiant damage with their weapon attacks, all just from being a paladin. There are a ton of customization options, and no two characters are the same. However, there are a few things that are always present on a character sheet. Most importantly, it's the 6 main stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Each of these categories is assigned a number between 3 and 18. We determine each number by adding together the best 3 results from a roll of 4 6-sided dice. For reference, the human average for each of these scores is 10. Every person you see walking around will have an average score of 10 for each of these. Your friend who is a bodybuilder might have a strength of 13, and your friend who still smokes cigarettes might have a wisdom of 8, but on average, everyone's got about a 10. We're not playing the game in the real world, though. We're playing in a fantasy world, and the players are heroes, so they get to go a little higher. Your ability scores determine the bonuses that you get to attacking, dealing damage, spellcasting, and using all your different skills. If you want to determine whether the person you're talking to is lying, I'll ask you to make an insight check, which means roll your 20-sided die and add the bonus from your insight skill, which is tied to your wisdom. So, how do the ability scores determine bonuses? For every 2 points above 10 you have, you get a +1 to all rolls involving that ability score. So if I have a constitution of 14, I get a +2 bonus to my defense against getting sick from having eaten a rotten tomato. Conversely, for every 2 points below 10 you have, you get a -1. If I have a wisdom of 6, that gives me a -2 to wisdom-based rolls, and explains why I didn't think to check if the tomato was rotten when I was cutting it up for my fruit salad. Now let's talk about fighting. Depending on the story and the group playing, combat can be a very large part of D&D. There's too much to really get into any detail here, but I'll give you the absolute basics. When a fight begins, everybody rolls initiative, which is a roll of a d20 plus your dexterity bonus. The bad guys each roll initiative too, and the results of these rolls determine the order that each character will act in. On a character's turn, they can make a movement, an action, and a bonus action. Moving is usually up to about 30 feet, which we determine either through discussion or by looking at a battle map. When we use a battle map, it will be drawn over a field of squares, with each square representing 5 feet of movement. You'll be able to see our battle maps on our YouTube channel. An action can be anything from swinging your sword at the enemy, to trying to push that enemy off a cliff, to taking a second movement because last turn you pushed the enemy off the cliff and you want to get in range of the next enemy to start swinging your sword again. There are detailed rules for all of these possibilities and many more. Bonus actions are smaller actions, and you usually only have access to them through your choice of race, class, or other character features. For example, the disengage action, which allows you to move carefully away from an enemy instead of making yourself vulnerable to attack by turning your back and running, is usually a full action. However, members of the rogue class get to take a disengage as a bonus action each turn. So if you were a rogue, you could run up to an opponent, stab them, and then safely retreat every turn, where other players would have to choose between the attack or the retreat. Speaking of attacking, attacks are made by rolling a d20, adding your relevant combat modifier, which is usually strength, and then comparing the result to the enemy's AC, or armor class. AC represents not only the strength of a character's armor, but also their ability to dodge incoming attacks, or even just withstand heavy blows. If the attack meets or beats the defender's AC, a damage roll is made, and the target loses that many hit points. When a creature reaches 0 hit points, they are knocked unconscious, and in most cases, must start rolling d20s to see if they die, but we'll get into that another time. Casting a spell on an enemy target works in a similar way. The enemy target must roll their relevant defensive skill. Sometimes that's a dexterity save to jump out of the path of a fireball, or sometimes it's a constitution save to resist a spell intended to make them debilitatingly sick to their stomach. Anyway, there's a lot more to say about all this, but I've already taken up enough of your time. There's just one little note that I want to end on, and that's the role of the Game Master. I am not the enemy of the players, even though I am playing the villains along with every other character in the setting. If I wanted to kill the players, I could easily make them fight a massive dragon or some other creature that's way too powerful for them and that just eats them alive. And that wouldn't be fun or interesting, though. It's my job to set up challenges that they can overcome and then to let them surprise me with their creativity and their resourcefulness. I may go into a play session thinking I know what's going to happen, but they can always surprise me. And the best games are often the ones where nothing goes the way the Game Master planned. But you'll see. You'll see how that goes as you listen. Thanks for listening, and I hope this gives you a basic idea of what we're doing. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.